you so much for joining to this session. We are just going to wait 1 minute while the rest of the colleagues join to the platform, and we really want to thank you for being here on time. In the meantime, I will just ask you to please let you know that this conversation aims to be a dialogue. So if you want to take the floor, don't be shy and please just raise your hand and we will pass you to the platform to be able to take the floor. But you can also share your comments, your thoughts in the chat, and we will be able to read it. So once again, thank you everyone for joining. My name is Sandra Guzman. I'm the General Director of the Clama Finance Group for Latin America and the Caribbean, GFLAC, and we are very, very happy to have this conversation to talk about a critical process that is happening at the moment. And this conversation is a dialogue precisely in collaboration with the COP29 and the COP30 presidencies that are leading a very important process. As you know, back in 2024, last year at COP30, there was agreed a new collective and quantified goal. Uh, the first agreement was to increase the 100 billion to 300 billion to mobilize resources to support the action of the climate action in developing countries. The parties recognized that 300 billion were not enough to really address all the challenges that developing countries are facing. And that's why the parties decided to then create a roadmap, the Baku to Belém roadmap, to mobilize at least 1.3 trillion of dollars to support climate action in developing countries. Not only the national determined contributions, but also the national adaptation plans and others. Of course, the critical elements of this roadmap aim to not only mobilize resources, but particularly take into consideration those instruments that avoid the creation of more debt and also that support developing countries to increase their fiscal space. Today, we are very happy to have this dialogue with two representatives from the COP30 and the COP29 that have been working very hard to put together this roadmap. And that's why we are very happy to introduce our colleagues Luis de Andrade Filho, who is a COP30 Presidency Finance Coordinator. And we are going to have also the presence of Elmadine Medijev, who is the Finance Team Leader and Senior Negotiator from the COP29 Presidency Office. This conversation aims to be a dialogue, not only about how the roadmap has been, progressing, what are the critical elements to consider in the process, where is the roadmap at the moment in terms of its design. But the aim is also to hear a little bit more about what are the critical elements that the presidencies are considering to include in this important roadmap. And we are also aiming to have a space not only to listen from the COP29 and the COP30 presidencies, these updates, but also the aim is to have a conversation with different colleagues, with different experts that have been very close to this process. Let's remember that the NCQG took around 3 years to be together, and the idea of these processes just to have a dialogue with different organizations, experts, and colleagues that are very, very much interested in supporting this roadmap that is critical for developing countries. So how we are going to have this dynamic, we are going to have an introduction from Luis and Elmadine to tell us a little bit more about how the roadmap is going and more of the critical updates. And then we're going to open the floor to have this conversation, to have this dialogue. And then we're going to give the floor back to Luis and Elmadine to react to some of the points that organizations and colleagues would like to share. Of course, there are so many needs that are required from developing countries, but it's important to say what are those critical priorities that different groups and different organizations would like to see in this roadmap. So with that, I would love to, first of all, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Luis and Elmadine, for accepting this invitation to be in this dialogue, and also thank you to all the collaborators, all the organizations, all the networks that have been pushing for this process and that have been working very hard to have a climate finance architecture that really tackles and takes into account the needs of developing countries. So please, everyone that would like to have comments or questions, please use the chat. But if you would like to take the floor, please, you can also raise your hand and we are going to transfer you to the platform where you can also take the mic and share your thoughts and your ideas. So with that, I would love to welcome then Luis and Elmadin for being here and to share with us, all the different processes that are happening. We know that is a difficult task, but also we trust that this process will also help a lot the climate action in developing countries. And the reason why we really would like to hear more is to also hear how can we support, how can we as organizations, as groups, can also support this important process. So I would love to then invite Elmadine Medijev, a finance team leader and senior negotiator of the COP29 presidency office, to take the floor and tell us a little bit more about the process. Elmadine, why is this roadmap so important, and what are the critical elements? What are the key elements of the process, and where are you at the moment, and also what else is coming in the next few weeks that we have before the COP30. Elmarin, thank you so much for joining, and please, you have the floor.
Thank you, dear Sandra. First of all, I would like to greet everybody, my dear friend and colleague Luis, and all colleagues, representatives of civil society. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know that people are joining from different time zones to this important discussion, in my view. And I would like to start with your first question. What are the main points of the roadmap and why we need it? Actually, uh, speaking about the background, everybody remember very well, not well as me because I was directly, all day living with this NCQG issue, but in general, of course, that was very important document for general global climate action. And so many ideas were voiced last year, not just during the COP, throughout the year, throughout 2024. We were in process to discuss with relevant stakeholders, parties and non-party stakeholders, the composition of the new collective quantified goal, the quantum, and at the same time, the quality of climate finance and the structure, a goal formulation. All these issues were something which were a high priority for everybody talking about the climate finance. So, of course, positions were divergent, and our mission was to find the commonalities and to make it more convergence throughout the process. And we had 11 technical expert dialogues and 3 ad hoc work group meetings. And in these meetings, and also, of course, submissions from parties, and many ideas were voiced. But reality is that uh, in almost 6-page decision, it's not possible to reflect all the expectations, all the positions. Main positions are in the document. This is what all parties agreed upon. But of course, there were some issues which are the also some details, but at the same time aspirations, which were not included to the exactly to the new collective quantified goal. But the decision itself reflected the aspirations of parties, in particular, of course, developed and developing parties and least developed parties. We are talking about the trillion were ambition and aspiration of many throughout the year, talking about the climate finance. And NCQG document actually addressed this issue and identified as a target 1.3 trillion goal. So from that point of view, this is very important. The 300 billion part of this is NCQG, but the rest 1 trillion, that's the question. that yes, we first of all parties recognize this need as a financial need, but at the same time, it's very important to work on this target and how we can reach there, how we can get there. For that, Baku to Belém roadmap is of utmost importance, and two presidencies, COP29 and COP30, as you know, are mandated to uh, conduct work on this roadmap and to present the report. So we are in a very close coordination and communication almost daily with our Brazilian colleagues, in particular Luis. And from our side, I am the focal point, but our teams are working. And we had starting from the early start of this year, we had online consultations. Then there was several rounds of the submissions. The last one actually we have finalized on 10th of September deadline, and there were more than 200 uh, submissions. And I would like to underline here the active participation and important role of the civil society. Because if you will compare the number of the submissions received from all stakeholders, and you will see that civil society and non-party stakeholders, they are dominating in showing interest, but at the same time presenting their positions and ideas. From that point of view, taking this opportunity, I would like to thank everybody and each organization providing us with their inputs. So our mission here is that to find a language, to find a structure, to find a formula which will represent everybody. But first of all, let's not forget that this roadmap is for 1.3 trillion. So it's about the climate finance, that aspired number. So first of all, this roadmap will serve how to achieve this 1.3 trillion. And later on, as much as possible, of course, we'll try to accommodate different views and positions there. So I don't want to take much time of you in the beginning. Here I will stop and I'm passing floor back to you, but I'll be more than happy if there will be any specific question or any comment uh, required from me. I'll be more than happy to reply on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Elmadine, and thanks a lot for also sharing. It's very, very important to recognize that there are several views about what the roadmap should be, what are the synergies, the convergences, and it's a difficult task. But as you said, it's also an important process because it's like really not only staying in the 300 billion, but really trying to embrace the need to scale up like the resources in at least 1.3. And what you said, the submissions are reflecting the key interest that a lot of parties have really on the process. And we thank you for sharing your thoughts. And we will of course come back, and just to say to colleagues, if there are specific questions that you would like to ask, please send them in the chat, and we will have also an opportunity to exchange, and I'm sure Elmadine and Luis will be able to answer. So let me pass the mic to Luis also to talk a little bit about how are you imagining. I'm sure there are several topics, several issues that you like to be reflected, but as Elmadine said, is sometimes it's complex, it's difficult to have everything there. But if you would like to share, how are you thinking? What are the critical elements that you are considering? And also for us to think a little bit more about what are those key elements? And then, as I said, how can we support this important process? So Luis, thank you so much for being here. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much to, first of all, Sandra and Nicole from GFLAC for inviting us for this very important event and for this discussion, which is really at a crucial moment in our collaboration to conclude the report. I'd like to thank my dear friend Elmadine for setting the scene and in front of everybody thanking him and his team and COP29 presidency for the very close collaboration and joint work, not only in regarding the Baku to Belém roadmap, but throughout the year in making sure that we have a very good transition from the current presidency of COP29 to the incoming presidency, so that we get to a very good starting point and basis in Belém for our work. So my public word of thanking our COP29 colleagues. And as Elmadine was saying, I think what the process so far shows is that we have a lot of trust from the parties, from civil society, from non-party stakeholders in the work that we are developing towards concluding the process that was launched in Baku. Not only for the number of submissions, as Elmadine said, the content of the submissions and the strong participation of civil society, but mainly because what everybody is saying is that they want solutions, a solutions-oriented roadmap, and that discussions need to be inclusive, and that those solutions have to have a strong country ownership and support and backing for us to get to this very important objective of achieving 1.3 trillion climate finance by 2035. So really, it's a very challenged task, because we have to make this magic number something more concrete. And we are really thankful to parties and non-party stakeholders for the trust that they have in both presidencies working together with the Secretariat to deliver that. Secondly, what I want to say is that we are obviously living a very challenging time. As we know, the world is confronting multiple and intensifying crises day after day. We continue to have challenges in tackling that distress in developing countries, and climate impacts are just worsening. But the other side of the coin is that this transition is happening. It's not happening at the pace that we need, but it is happening. When we see, for instance, recent data that shows that investments in clean energy now outpaces by a magnitude of 2 fossil fuels. Just 5 years ago, it was 1-to-1, and now it's 2-to-1. We have been seeing increases in commitments to fight deforestation and ensuring that indigenous peoples and communities are part of a just transition, and obviously all the benefits of the transition in general. The problem is that so far this transition it's concentrated mostly in developed countries, and to some extent in some of the developing countries. So the challenge that we have to face and that we are trying to respond is how to make sure that this transition also reaches at the pace and scale that is needed developing countries. And obviously, as you know, we as COP30 are putting implementation at the center of those discussions. When we think about the 3 main priorities of COP30, so the strengthening of multilateralism, making sure that our discussions and our process go back to real people's lives, so that we connect again the fight against climate change to their needs, and the acceleration of the implementation of the Paris Agreement. In essence, all those 3 elements are very much related to the work that COP29 and COP30 have to say how we are going to put finance at the center of those 3 main priorities. So we need scaled up and timely finance, and if we don't have that, the Paris Agreement will not be implemented. So what we really need is to set a vision that help us navigate for the next 10 years time. The last thing I want to say before listening to all of you, because that's the purpose of the exercise here, it's really to listen to you. What I want to say is that we are living a very difficult moment, as we all know, and we have to be very honest about it. But the advantage of the roadmap is that we are looking where we can be in 10 years' time, where we should be in 10 years' time. So it gives us the opportunity to really imagine where and what the steps that we need to take now, the steps that we need to take in the short run, in the medium run, to be there where we need to be in the long run. So we really are confident that this spirit was captured by our discussions and all the submissions that we have received. We have very, very good contributions that talks about what developed countries should be doing, what developing countries can do to strengthen their contribution towards the Paris Agreement. We have very strong contributions on what multilateral development banks and other IFIs can do, what we need to do to strengthen the financial mechanism and the multilateral climate funds. And obviously, we also have very good ideas on what needs to be done from the point of view of the private sector. So we really are working really hard, trust us, to make sure that all these different contributions are very well organized and help us to put and to put also us on the right track and imagine where we want to be in 10 years' time. We really see the roadmap not just as a process, but really as an opportunity to shape a debate in the next couple of years to demonstrate that ambition and solidarity and fulfilling of financial obligations and action can prevail over the crisis that we're living in. And we must really unite ourselves around this. And we really hope that what we are going to deliver towards the end of this month will respond positively and raise to the expectations. Now, we know that we are not going to fix all the problems. I wish El Madin and me and our presidents would have all the power to fix all the problems. We are not going to be able to fix all the problems, but we do hope that we can show the different paths that we could, as parties, as observers, as economic actors, cross to be where we need to be in 10 years' time. So I don't want to say much. Well, I'm really looking forward to hearing you, and thanks again to Sandra and Nicole and Elmadine for agreeing to do this, and we're really looking forward to the contributions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luis, and thanks a lot for also sharing the challenges that you are facing, not only as presidencies in putting this together, but evidently outside the world is facing several constraints that are sometimes very, very complicated to do so. However, as you said, there are so many opportunities, and how the opportunities will be embraced is also a very, very important point. So now I'm going to invite colleagues, organizations that will like to also take the floor to share their views, their priorities in regards to how they see the key elements for the roadmap. And I'm also gonna, so once we have this intervention, I see so very important questions in the chat. So I will go through the questions, but also if colleagues that are doing their questions in the chat would like to take the floor, they can raise their hands. But I'm just gonna comment. I'm gonna ask a couple of them, and then after a few colleagues have some interventions, I will come to you, and then you can address these questions. So I'm just gonna say for instance, there are questions about how the roadmap will ensure a balance, no, between not only the quantity but particularly the quality of finance, in this element of how they will be distributed in mitigation, adaptation, and also loss and damage. That is also a very, very critical point. And there are also questions about how to if there will be a draft if there will be if there is a plan to share a draft in pre-COP, and to what extent civil society will be able to see this. And then you will see some questions about sources, no, the role of developed countries taking the lead, but to what extent is expected to have participation from developing countries as well. So how do you see this? And also other questions about, for instance, Annex 2, in the participation of not only inclusion of addition finance, but also to what extent other means of implementation will be considered. So you will see many of these questions. I will go through them, so don't worry, colleagues, but I'm just gonna give the floor to some colleagues that would like to also share their thoughts, their priorities, as well as other potential questions that they would like to pass you. But I will be sharing the questions, and then at the end you can also address them. So let me pass the floor to David Riffisch from German Watch, also to share some of their thoughts and key points that we'd like to bring to the conversation. David, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Sandra and GFLAC, for organizing, and obviously MRD and Luis for your time. I just want to share some principles that we've worked out with climate finance experts that we see as essential for the roadmap. So without losing much time, I will dive right into it. First principle is that we believe the public finance element needs to go first as part of the roadmap. We also see the concern in the negotiations around 9.1. It is in the provisional agenda, and it shows this concern as will public finance be there. So the roadmap clearly needs to reaffirm and strengthen that role. And also, Luis, you highlighted where do we want to stand in 10 years' time. That is true. And obviously, we hope that the private sector, as we see, as you said, the transformation is playing a bigger role. But we also need to see where it will likely not play a role, so that it's clear that public finance will play a key role. Unfortunately, we're in the situation that development finance and climate finance budgets are going down in many developed countries, which is very bad. But it also takes us to the point that we will need to look at new innovative sources of finance. And it is right that polluters should pay their part to climate finance action. So as a third component of public finance first, we see innovative sources of finance like solidarity levies that should be included. We heard the element of quality, and that takes us to the second point. We need a lot of clarity on adaptation finance. We need not just the quantity, but also the quality of finance, which is particularly important for adaptation in terms of grants and highly concessional finance. And we heard again a little bit in the G20, for example, a coming together of adaptation, loss and damage. It's important that the roadmap distinguishes adaptation finance and loss and damage finance because it has two different purposes. Third, in order to show that the NCQG is moving quickly to implementation through the roadmap, we need to do a sprint on access and collaboration. Access has a really strong part in the NCQG qualitative part. So it's crucial that the roadmap shows how we can accelerate the access part and improve further on the collaboration side of the different actors of the climate finance ecosystem. We've seen a lot of debate on country platforms, but there's more potential around still MDB, EFIs, the regional national development banks, climate funds, etc. Fourth point, and it's great, Luis, that you highlighted debt distress because we need to somehow supercharge the fiscal space. And so the roadmap should definitely look at how to increase fiscal capacity for climate action and also link it to other multinational spaces. We see the negotiations on the trade convention is happening in parallel in Nairobi. This is an interesting connection that could be used for that. And we've had, because you mentioned that, we've had lots of different reports this year on that, expert review on that, Nature and Climate, Jubilee Commission. We're still waiting for the African Expert Commission on capital cost. So bringing these debt elements into the roadmap is really important to make space on the fiscal space. And then the fifth priority is clearly being accountable, because we don't want the roadmap just to be a nice report that then ends up on the virtual shelf, but really will be implemented. And you highlighted distinguishing between short and medium implementation. I think that's really good. We need those different timeframes and clear recommendations. But we also need to see it somehow held accountable in the UNFCCC process. So we need to find a way to include it in that way and link it clearly to the global stock take, because that is our inbuilt ratcheting up mechanism. I will conclude with 2 words on process. We heard in the chat, is it coming with pre-COP? That would be very useful to obtain clarity for pre-COP already. What is the draft of the roadmap? Because then Brazil and Azerbaijan could line up some champions already for the Leaders Summit to see that the roadmap will very quickly move towards implementation, something that we saw in FFD4, which was a good case where FFD4 results were already directly taken to implementation through SPA. And then the biggest challenge maybe still ahead is how to include it in the negotiation space. And there it would be very beneficial if, and Madine, Luis, you could indicate of how do you see the process going in the UNFCCC process, even though it's obviously not a negotiated element of the roadmap. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, David. And so what I will propose is to have this round of interventions, and then I'm going to come back to you, Luis, and then Madine, and then we can have a second one, and then also kind of have a reaction. And the colleagues that are about to intervene, please, no more than 3 minutes to keep it short and sharp, and then we have the chance to hear other views as well. So I will give the floor to Benito Müller, and if you guys can also introduce your institution, and welcome. Thank you so much. You have the floor, Benito.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Just as well. Hello, Luis. Good to see you again. Right. I'm going to be short, as Benedictas used to say, brief, but not necessarily. Anyway, point is, I've been in the process for quite a while. And to be honest, I have gone off targets, milestones, all that sort of, long-term stuff. I'm still doing climate finance, but I feel very strongly that we need to do something now, even if it's small, pedestrian, but something that the world sees, particularly the most vulnerable countries. Money is actually flowing. Even if it's peanuts, at least it's peanuts, right? So I have been working on this Climate Solidarity Alliance idea. We introduced it at our last Oxford seminar in August. Lilian was there. She suggested that we should make a submission to the Baku to Belém roadmap. We did. I have just shared it, so you can look at it there. And basically, all I'm saying is that this roadmap should not just be about where are we going to be in 2035. It also has to try to get some concrete action which we can do now, right? To keep the trust, or to build trust, north, south, and whichever way. And to do so without having to go through a multilateral process and whatnot. What we're proposing is basically countries getting together and doing it by themselves as a coalition of, I hate that word, coalition of the willing, but that's what it is. We had that for HIV/AIDS. We had it with the French air ticket solidarity levy 20 years ago, and that has worked for 20 years. So let's do something similar, in particular for loss and damage. And why loss and damage? It's very simple. Mitigation, adaptation, one can choose not to do. It may not be wise, but one can choose it. Loss and damage, there is no choice. It's basically the climate which dictates it. And you have to be ready. You have to be, this is civil protection, and any government, whatever level, national, subnational, civil protection is one of the core remits everywhere, and you cannot pass the buck. So you have to prepare domestically, and this alliance is meant to help. So please have a look at the submission, and let's try to make this go. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Benito, and thanks a lot also for emphasizing the importance of building trust in this process, a critical piece to continue. Now I'm going to give the floor to Nicole Makowski.
Thank you, Sandra, and thanks to all Martina and Luis for the opportunity to dialogue with civil society. So my name is Nicole Makowski. I'm part of GFLAC, but I'm now speaking on behalf of Breadfast, which is the Latin American and Caribbean Network for a Sustainable Financial System. So I will be briefly mentioning 5 of our key priorities based on our submission of September 10. So in our view, public finance has to be the foundation of the roadmap. Developed countries must deliver predictable, grant-based, and concessional finance. Without this commitment, the 1.3 trillion goal will not be credible. Second, and I think David and Benito were also mentioning this, we need to close the adaptation gap. Adaptation must stand on equal footing with mitigation. And this can be done in different ways, but one we are considering is tripling adaptation finance by 2030, ensuring resources for adaptation are grant-based and channeled directly to the most vulnerable communities, which therefore involves the vertical climate funds. Third, the quality and accessibility of finance. So it's not just about the volume. Finance must avoid unsustainable debt and uphold human rights, gender equality, and indigenous people's rights. And access must be simplified so that local actors can directly benefit. Fourth, structural reforms to the financial system. We need systemic change. Reforming MDBs, advancing debt relief, and further exploring innovative sources such as global taxes on fossil fuels, aviation, and shipping to expand fiscal space, which is also part of the roadmap's mandate. And last but not least, inclusive and accountable governance. So the roadmap will only have legitimacy if civil society, indigenous peoples, and local communities are meaningfully involved. With transparency and accountability, finance can deliver just and equitable outcomes. So in short, more money, better money, fairer systems, and real accountability so climate finance truly works for those who need it the most. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole, and thanks also to reinforce this element that has been coming in the chat about how to ensure a balance between not only the quantity, but primarily about the quality of finance. And I'm going to give the floor to Andres Mogro. You have the floor, Andres.
Thank you very much, Sandra, and thank you to GFLAC for organizing this conversation. It's very nice to hear directly from Luis and from Elmadine about their impressions on the process. My name is Andres. I work in Fundación Avina. And the question I had for you guys is what you think the potential outcome of the conversation around sources will be on the 1.3 roadmap, because and my feeling is the roadmap exists because developing countries were not happy with the result of the NCQG. I mean, they had a proposal and developed countries had a proposal, and when you read the outcome of the NCQG, it's much closer to what developed countries were pushing for in COP29 than what developing countries wanted. And my feeling was that even in the 300 billion, you don't necessarily say it's only coming from developed countries. You say developed countries are taking the lead, but there's an implication of developing countries having a role there. And my concern there is that there will be a big push to have an accountability exercise where you it essentially puts us all in the same basket. And then my concern is that if we have a conversation around 1.3, and I agree with everything that Nicole said right now, I think that's precisely the position that historically the developing countries have been having. But my concern is that in the 1.3 conversation, how do we not keep this from being a conversation about all other sources aside from those that are particularly pointed at in the 300 billion? Because in 300 billion, you say developed countries will take the lead, encourage, and then for me, there's an understanding that 1.3 is everything outside of that. So it's everything that's additional to the 300 billion. So I'm worried that the 1.3 conversation will be one about other sectors, the private sector, investment, multilateral banks, and everyone who is not at the table. You have a conversation about what you want actors who are not at the table to do, instead of what actors who are actually at the table will do to influence those external stakeholders. So my concern is that you will have a conversation not focused on governments, where governments are the only participants. So it will be very difficult to come up with them that is forcible. That's why I'm asking what you think the role of sources will be in this context. Sorry if I took too long. Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you so much, Andres, and also thanks for clarifying or questioning this point on what are the sources and how this kind of play a role, in who is paying in the conversation, which is very critical. So I'm gonna pass the floor to Nada El Bohi. I hope I said correct your name. And also I'm gonna encourage other colleagues that would like to take the floor just to raise your hands and we will bring you to the session. Nada, you have the floor. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Sandra. And yeah, it's a difficult name. You did well. And thank you for organizing this conversation and the opportunities for consultation after SB62. So I'll briefly introduce myself. I'm Nada Buhi, a feminist environmental advocate, program manager at Frederick Ebert Foundation in Egypt, and I serve on the facilitative committee of the Women and Gender constituency. I'd like to begin by first emphasizing that the roadmap, as others has mentioned, must be guided by the commitment to equity and justice embedded in the Paris Agreement and reiterated in the NCQG, especially principles of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities, and polluter pays, as well as inclusivity, gender responsiveness, and human rights. It must center the rights and decision-making power of communities vulnerable to climate impacts, and this includes Indigenous people, women, gender diverse persons, youth, and people with disabilities, workers, migrants. And the roadmap has to be more than just a report presented at COP30. It has to be an action plan ensuring adequate, predictable, non-debt inducing, high quality and accessible climate finance that responds to communities' needs. It also must uphold the obligation of developed countries to provide public finance in the forms of grants and highly concessional non-debt creating instruments. And this includes for mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage, and a just transition. I have 6 core action points I'd like to briefly present, keeping in mind the time. First is the quality and scale. The roadmap must clarify what is counted as climate finance, and there must be at least an exclusion list of what cannot be considered, such as carbon markets and market rate financing. Again, it's not just quantity, but also quality. Finance has to be grant-based, gender-responsive, accessible, and prioritized for locally led action. It also should deliver a plan for tripling finance, particularly as mentioned for adaptation, loss, and damage, and tripling outflows by 2030 to multilateral funds, such as the Adaptation Fund. The second is access to community. The roadmap has to elaborate pathways for increasing direct access to climate finance through simplified grant mechanisms. And for example, you can leverage already existing structures like women's funds and indigenous people's funds that can serve as intermediaries to scale direct access. The third is addressing barriers. Climate finance, as was mentioned, does not exist in a vacuum. The roadmap has to tackle disenablers such as unjust debt burdens, the high costs of capital, and unilateral trade measures, while leveraging UNFCCC processes like the Sharm el-Sheikh Dialogue on Article 2.1c. Fourth, the roadmap must endorse innovative sources of public finance, such as taxing polluters, fossil fuel profits, and redirecting military spending. So the money is there. It just has to be directed towards climate action. For 2024, there was a record high of military spending of around $2.7 trillion US dollars. Fifth, the roadmap cannot rely on inflated expectation of private sector leverage, which has proven debt-inducing and unpredictable. If public finance is used to incentivize private investments, it has to prioritize domestic, medium, small, micro enterprises in developing countries, which are the backbone of sustainable climate action and not multinational corporations. And I just wanted to emphasize that, documented experiences has shown that for every public funding, so every dollar spent public funding on private investive leveraging has only returned about 50 cents. And lastly, the roadmap has to recognize the broader international financial architecture under which it works, and that constrains developing countries. It should propose processes to hold actors outside the UNFCCC accountable, including debt cancellation, international financial institutions reform, ensuring it aligns with human rights, climate action, and sustainable development. I hope I stuck to the 3 minutes, and thank you. Back to you, Sandra.
Thank you so much, Nada, and also thanks for bringing these principles and the gender equity as a critical point to be cross-cutting across all the financial issues and, of course, roadmap. Thank you so much. I will give the floor to Emil.
Hello. Thank you very much, Sandra, Luis, Elmadin. Can you hear me?
We can, Emil.
Great. First, I want to say I agree with the previous speakers on the different issues mentioned. I'm from the Indigenous Peoples constituency, so I'll focus on matters that are specific to Indigenous peoples. But as I said, I'm in agreement with the previous speakers. First, the Baku Belém roadmap, it seeks to scale up climate finance, but for Indigenous peoples, we think it's climate finance as it's currently structured, or its current structure, it's not working for Indigenous peoples. So even if it were to be scaled up without reforms, it wouldn't necessarily improve how climate finance is reaching Indigenous peoples. So for example, despite managing nearly a third of the world's terrestrial surface, only 0.13% of climate finance related ODA includes an Indigenous peoples organization, according to a study by Rainforest Norway. So it's both inaccessible, but also the Indigenous peoples organizations are not being included in the decision making. And also there's also many projects that are implemented in violation of Indigenous peoples' rights, such as carbon markets. So we think it's important not just to scale up, but also to address those structural issues and problems, because otherwise, even if we scale it up, it will fail to enable the effective implementation of climate action on the ground in this very significant territory that Indigenous peoples are managing. So some of our key priorities, well, first of all, our rights-based approach that recognizes the distinct collective rights of Indigenous peoples. And we have some concerns about the increased narrative on the importance of the private sector, such as loans from multilateral development banks to the private sector, because we think those projects are a lot of times inherently have inherent human rights risks, such as there was just a recent study coming out that showed that multilateral development banks are even classifying transition minerals and fossil gas as climate finance. And of course, those have big risks for Indigenous peoples. So we think there needs to be criteria to exclude environmentally and socially harmful financing. Secondly, equitable access for Indigenous peoples. As I said, existing mechanisms are not accessible for Indigenous peoples. So one of our proposals is for dedicated funding windows for Indigenous peoples, as well as measures to reduce barriers to access. On the type of financing, we think this should be grants-based public finance, such as many others have mentioned, and not include carbon markets or market rate loans. Thirdly, the full and effective participation and representation in decision-making. As I was saying, we often lack the means to participate in decision-making on projects that are taking place within our territories or that overlap with our territories. So So we think it's important that indigenous peoples can participate in both the design and governance and implementation of the roadmap, but also that the roadmap itself promotes the full and effective participation of indigenous peoples within different mechanisms, such as whether it's multilateral, bilateral funding, or other types of mechanisms. And to conclude, I also want to stress that it's important that when indigenous peoples are mentioned, it's not just symbolic mentions of mentioning, for example, that indigenous peoples protect large territories, or that it's important to include indigenous peoples. Too often the references are like this, but they lack operative measures. So in the roadmap, we would like to see clear operative paragraphs and practical commitments, and not just those symbolic references. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emil, and also thanks for bringing the important role of indigenous people as not only making accessible mechanisms, but also making part of the governance of these important mechanisms. So I will give the floor to Rebecca, and then I will pause to give you, Luis and Elmadine, the micro back. I know that there are so many points, and then we're gonna continue with the conversation, and thank you, everyone. Just keep raising your hands, and then we will give you the floor. Rebecca, thank you so much for being here. You have the floor.
Thanks, Sandra. Thanks, Luis and Nadine. Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Thyssen. I work at CAN International. Very happy to be here. So I'll try to make my intervention maybe a bit complementary to what has been said already, because I think a lot of things have been covered. And as we say, I'm aligning myself with majority of statements made before me. So I think we have to resituate the roadmap within the question of what is the type of legacy we're expecting Belém to give the world, right? In a very complex context, as Luis was alluding to. And so in that legacy, what is the role of the roadmap? And so I think there are three main things we are expecting. One is to convey a clear message. Two is to show the way. And three is to connect the dots. About conveying a clear message, I think David and Nada said it very clearly. Without any ambiguity, we have to restate clearly what is the role of public provision as a critical enabler for climate action. Of course, in the context of equity, of CBDR, of the question of 9.1, and providing qualitative finance for developing countries. I think it really should be, without any ambiguity, that's the first headline of the roadmap. Then I think the second point, where I'd be keen also to have your views, but you've been hearing me saying that already, is how can the roadmap show the way within the UNFCCC maze, right? Because we have to get a document that's actually connected to the negotiation themselves. And so we are calling that a negotiation lighthouse, for lack of better word, but we would really benefit from a report that actually can assess the current climate finance landscape, list the different avenues that exist, also taking stock of what are the consequences and the implication of the NCQG decision, and see what needs to happen within that context between now and 2035. So ideally, we would really expect the roadmap also to dare to take kind of a creative and bold approach to suggest way forward, to navigate that negotiating space.
Hello.
Sorry?
Yes.
Sorry,
Hold on, let me just...
please mute yourself. Thank you.
So,
Go ahead.
for example, providing a clear plan on how we're going to reach paragraph 16 of the NCQG decision. How are we going to triple those outflows of the UNFCCC fund, right? What would be the sequence between now and 2035 to achieve that? We have now the mention of these enablers in the NCQG decision. How are we going to address this question, right? What are the different avenues, the different tracks where parties could actually become much more concrete about those questions? So diving into the implication of the real, landscape we have in front of us on the UNFCCC table is essential. And if we don't do that, we risk, to stay off ground and not connected to what negotiators and government can actually do. And the third point, it has already been touched upon by the previous panelists or speakers, is how to connect the dots. And I liked what Nada said about climate finance not happening in a vacuum. The roadmap is also a clear opportunity to finally give the UNFCCC the opportunity to bring those different actors and processes at the same table, right? And send clear signals. Because for too long, we've been timidly sending some messages to MDBs here and there, convening some messages to the G20 or to the wider financial architecture, but without really proposing a pragmatic and concrete approach. And again, through this kind of in-between process that the roadmap is, a presidency initiative, we really have the opportunity to convene actors, send signals, and address those systemic barriers that are, refraining developing countries to access the finance they need because of high cost of capital, debt distress, and all of the other structural elements my colleagues have been talking about. I'll stop here. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, and also thank you for emphasizing what other colleagues have been saying about the importance of connecting the roadmap within the process of the UNCCC, but also what are those systemic connections that need to happen also outside. So I will give you the floor again, Elmadine and Luis, to react, to comment. Of course, there are several points, several questions, and it's going to be impossible to address every single one, but probably just to reflect, how do you see this balance in terms of the quality, quantity, the allocation of resources in a more equitable way for mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage, as well as how do you see this inclusion of the principles of the convention, the Paris Agreement, the need to include gender equality, as well as the respect of human rights and the role of indigenous communities? And also, how do you see these connections, like within the convention, but also other processes that are critical out there? So let me give you back the floor, and then we will continue. And we see more colleagues are raising their hands. We will give you the floor just now. So Elmadine, let me pass it to you to hear your thoughts and your reflections about what colleagues have been sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra, for presenting me floor once again. And I would like to thank everybody who contributed to this discussion through very meaningful comments and actually very important and actual questions. Thank you very much. And listening, everybody, remembering the last year, the discussions on NCQG. When we are talking about the climate finance, actually the realities are there. Nothing has changed. In general, I'm talking about the challenge and needs. And from that point of view, the questions raised here, they are very reasonable, and each of them should be addressed. And I think that the relevant answer should be found to respond to these questions, not here in general, as a matter of affecting the global climate action. When we are talking about the NCQG decision, because some friends, I remember the comment from Andres Mogro, for example, of course, we can criticize NCQG decision or NCQG itself as much as we want. But let's not forget the world where we are living in. We have to stick to the rules and regulations and realities of the world. It's not just one party. There is no one-sided position. It's a multilateral process. And what we use very frequently, all of us talking about the climate action, we use the word party-driven process. So when, for example, Andres says that developing countries lost or we lost in COP29, I cannot agree with this comment once developing countries voted for this. And I remember how very happily they were applauding with a standing ovation to the agreement on the NCQG. The real losing would be if there would not be any agreement. And we have to approach to this issue as in a systematic way. The climate action starts, there are documents adopted. We started from convention, then Kyoto Protocol, then we ended up with Paris Agreement. It's a process, evolving and developing process. But in general, the NCQG decision could not be approached away from this. And it's a logical end product or result of the ongoing process coming from the Paris Agreement also. And when we are talking about the climate finance and showing the direct source of the climate finance as developed countries and the public finance, okay, that's good. But if we are in a multilateral process and if all parties are deciding on this, the position of developed countries are very important here. If they are not agreeing or if they are not able to find a landing zone on this, then that's the problem. But the success of COP29 was that, I mean, despite of the very inconvenient, in general, geopolitical situation in the world, and you remember very well the political developments in different countries affecting the result of the COP. Despite all of these, that was the manifestation of the multilateral process. Parties were mature enough and strong enough in order to put their will and to adopt the decision. And I think that from that point of view, COP29 presidency achieved a very important success and the result. Actually, we have closed Paris rulebook and the new era of the climate finance has started. Again, I mean, let's imagine that COP29 is happening today or tomorrow. I can guarantee you that that would not be possible to achieve the same result because of the many concerns that our colleagues raised here also, the decreasing the climate finance, increasing not just climate finance, development finance, but increasing the military budget. This is the realities of our world we are living in. So from that point of view, of course, we are not losing hope for future and for bettering our agreements and achievements we have made. And there will be special part, special role to be played by Baku to Belém roadmap also. And when I saw in the written questions, and also that was voiced by several friends regarding the sources. First of all, I would like to mention that in the decision itself, it says from all sources, which means that, of course, developed countries are part of it. Now, our task is to find a way in the roadmap that the NCQG itself alone, for example, let's say, is not enough if we are talking about the mainly sources for coming from developed countries. But here we have a space to give the role to private sector also, to foundations, charity foundations. But again, we are not limiting it, and nobody excludes developed countries from these sources. So this is the task to COP29 and COP30 presidencies to present sources on different streams accordingly. And at the same time, there was a question about the adaptation and loss and damage. I would like to mention that both presidencies are committed to find the proper translation or proper phrasing in the roadmap and the proper presentation in the roadmap, providing balance between mitigation and adaptation. And by the way, there were important decisions on adaptation in Baku, and as a COP29 presidency, we are committed to focus on the adaptation goals. And from that point of view, I can underline and stress that this balance, we will do our best in order to, from the view of this balance, to address adaptation and loss and damage properly. And I would like to share with you several points regarding the ongoing process, regarding the content and substance of the document. And I believe that my colleague Luis definitely will have more to add on these comments. Just as I said in the beginning, many ideas and initiatives have been discussed before, and our aim now to find how can roadmap make a difference and catalyze implementation. actually of the decision on the NCQG, and inspired by NCQG call on all actors to work together. We have to see the roadmap actions and milestones in this spirit to work together. And also, we are cognizant of the broad range of discussions in the lead up to NCQG and the special considerations of different regions, including small island developing states and least developed countries, on freeing up fiscal space, enhancing access, and promoting use of innovative instruments. And also, we think that a series of actions will speak about the key components of the financial system and actors to scale up finance to 1.3 trillion, including, for example, strengthening coordination and capacity for and in developing countries, boosting concessional and low-cost sources of capital, mobilizing private finance at scale, freeing up fiscal space and enabling systems change, and so on. Also, there was a question about the taxation. One of the friends had mentioned that the COP30 will take place in parallel to the UN Convention on the tax. I mean, going through the submissions, I can very clearly state that the position of the countries on this matter are very divergent. And I mean, definitely, I mean, we cannot serve just to the interest of the group of the parties. We have to address everybody. We have to accommodate position of each parties and each stakeholder. From that point of view, this is one of the challenging issues, by the way. And so just I want to share with you that it's not very easy task. And this tax issue, again, positions are very different, but definitely we'll find a way to address this issue also and to reflect it appropriately. In general, I think that what is important about the roadmap, the content, the structure, the formulation, of course, all of these factors matter. But meanwhile, I think that what's very important about the roadmap is, first of all, as it is in the decision agreed in Baku, it's the recognition, it's the inclusion of the a trillion word to the climate finance, and that the process is very important. There is no, let's say, special stick with which you will solve all the issues and problems in one day or in 1 year. From that point of view, we have to be very fair and very realistic in our expectations. And we cannot put all the burden on the shoulders of one COP, specific COP, be it COP29 or COP30 or COP31. It's the ongoing process. And very important fact here is that we have to show the accumulative approach, year by year, COP by COP, to go to the place, to go to the target where we want to be, and which is very crucial and very important for the global climate action. From that point of view, COP30 presidency has already stated and announced that the COP30 is the implementation COP. Now we have to focus how we are going to achieve that implementation of the matters agreed in the previous COPs. And here, of course, as I said, the process is very important. 1.3 trillion is already in the documents, and it should be properly addressed. It's not just about this year. I believe that this decision, once it's agreed in COP29, there will be different type of discussions. For this year, it's not a negotiated document. It's the parties, and I think that this is one of the reasons why the parties not sharing, submissions, at least in a big number. So they are more inclined to share these submissions in a group view. We are receiving submissions from different groups. But it was not like this in the previous discussions, on the NSQG discussions. There, each party was inclined to present its own submission. So I think that it's also among the possibilities that there will be a day when 1.3 trillion, in general, the number of the trillion will be subject of the negotiations, and then the parties will start to find a way how they will implement realization of this 1.3 trillion. And from that aspect, Baku to Belém roadmap is a very important document. Actually, will serve as a basis for further discussions for parties to take obligations, to take commitments, and I believe that we are on a right way. And from here, I would like once again to thank and to appreciate the role of non-party stakeholders. And just my humble request will be, I do understand that everybody has their own agenda and position, but let's be fair in our reasonings. Let's be fair in our assessments. And we have to admit that, criticizing in a one-sided position any agreement the parties has achieved, it will not help the process. Of course, we are free to express our views and positions and also aspirations, but we have to be constructive in this and try to help and to contribute to the process. And I am pretty sure that for COP30 will continue success of the previous COPs. And here we will face and we will witness very important decisions, very important actions with a view of achieving the successful results. And taking this opportunity, I would like to wish good luck to first, of course, COP30 presidency and everybody, all climate activists and climate related, let's say, persons, and all of us, we are serving for the benefit of our planet, for the benefit of the humanity. And I wish everybody success in this noble service. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elmadin. I will pass the floor to Luis, and then we have a couple of more interventions, and then we can close up. But I just would like to pass you, Luis, the mic to share your thoughts about all these inputs that were provided, and also if you would like to address some of the questions. Thank you so much, Luis.
Thank you very much, and I'll try to be brief, given that Elmadin already touched upon a lot of the issues, including the fact that the mandate that we have in front of us is very clear about it being about public and private sources. So the roadmap will absolutely respond to the mandate that we have. And we are really encouraged, and I find absolutely important to underline that this has been a very important exercise, and I'm really encouraged by the comments and the very specific suggestions that we have had. Also building on some of the elements that Elmadin highlighted, we will provide suggestions and pathways that will touch both on the levers of quantity and quality. So it will not be a very simple mathematical equation where we see X times Z will lead to certain different numbers. We all know that those decisions are political. We all know that it's not the role of both presidencies to decide how much money goes to different parts or different sectors or different dimensions of our global fight against climate change. What we can say, however, is how to encourage those different discussions and how we can pull all those different levers to get us where we need to be. The second thing is about the outcome and to what extent we are going to suggest what the UNFCCC and parties obviously need to do and others. We understand that the process that we are tackling here is within, in the context, obviously, of the UNFCCC and within the remit of the Paris Agreement. And obviously, we want to make sure that we touch upon and make suggestions that speak to what we have under the UNFCCC. All the decisions that have been taken, in particular the NCQG decision, but the other different elements that speak to what we need, for instance, the financial mechanism, or and I'm really encouraged by one of the comments that I think was made by Rebecca on what needs to happen also beyond the remit of the UNFCCC. And I think for the first time here, we have a mandate or a call that talks about actors. We're not talking about parties only, we're talking about actors. And that's also how we understand our work and the outcome we are putting our efforts towards. Now, in terms of what needs to happen in the short, medium, and long term, we understand that there are things that are already happening, and that's why we made it. That's why we posed very specific questions in the submission process about how we consider multilateral initiatives that are ongoing, and we are not starting from zero on absolutely anything. And I'll just use the example of MDBs, where there has been extensive working around what MDBs can do and how they could be doing more to deliver on the SDGs in general, which obviously includes climate action. So we are certainly not starting from zero. What the roadmap can and will do is to indicate what is the real effort that is needed for those multilateral initiatives and other initiatives to prosper at the scale and the pace that we need. We are talking about quantity versus quality, or quantity and quality, not versus, because they are not opposed. We will, the way we are structuring our discussions, and that very much builds on what we got from submissions, is that we have to address the issues related to quantity. Let's just call them supply and demand of climate finance for the sake of the argument, but also issues related to access, and that will include access by different, with different, let's call, vulnerability lenses, that talks about obviously the special circumstances of LDCs and Cs, but also of vulnerabilities in terms of groups. So rest assured that those will not be symbolic, just as nice to haves, but really as a very important part of our work. And perhaps a third pillar of the different actions that we envisage in the roadmap is also, they also relate to how we can increase accountability and transparency and capacity building to get where we are. So we are really seeing this exercise from the viewpoint of this quantitative dimension and the qualitative dimension, that in our views, just for the sake of explaining it to you at the moment, are issues related to access, but also to accountability and transparency and capacity building in general. And finally, I would just say a lot of yeses to addressing the high cost of capital, to addressing issues like gender, as I said before, related to indigenous peoples and local communities and vulnerable groups. And we're very much conscious also of the different sources of information that were mentioned. By the way, as you know, we have been consulting through ministries of finance in the case of the COP30 presidency through the Circle of Finance Ministers, but also reaching out to economists that are producing and doing excellent work, not least on the issue of debt, and I will mention the very important work that Dr. Vera Song is doing, and so many other important contributions that we have had the privilege to listen to and to discuss that will help us navigate those very challenging barriers and hurdles that we have in front of us. So, as I said, I'm really encouraged by this discussion and really looking forward to the second round of questions. I must say that I have to duck out at latest on in 20 to 25 minutes, and I apologize in advance. So we're really looking forward to the last round of questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luis. So we're gonna move forward to the next interventions, and I will ask Said, Misan, and Elise to be like very short, and then we're gonna be able to have like some closing remarks from Luis and Elmadine. So Said, you have the floor, and hopefully you can stick to one maximum minute, and then I'm gonna pass it to Misan and then Elise. Thank you, Said. You have the floor.
I think, thank you, Sandra, and thank you for organizing this meeting. I think just on the sake of time, I think my question was addressed, so I will just give the floor to the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Said. I will give the floor to Misan.
Thank you. This is Professor Mizan Khan, an academic negotiator for the last quarter of a century. And I take a profession of a professor is to profess ideas. So along that line, I have been professing the idea of adaptation to be considered as a public good to bridge the gap between mitigation and adaptation finance. Then I have been also advocating the private sector financing, about which is extremely poor so far. So can we develop, raise a social movement to motivate the private sector with an enlightened profit-making approach? Because they live in the society that are being destroyed. So profit-making only can happen if the societies survive, if the economies survive. If they go down the drain, then profit-making cannot happen. So we need to motivate the private sector with kind of an enlightened approach. And then as a negotiator, I have been stressing on that traditional public sources will never suffice. So we need to look for alternative, innovative sources. And now we have been writing on air passenger levy, which Benito Muller is involved with. And now currently I'm involved with the research group under the Global Solidarity Levy Task Force. And we are doing a study on the premium class air ticket levy and its impact on the LDCs and seats, because the incidence of levy on the developing countries does not hold good anymore, because the elasticity is very poor. So we need to look for innovative sources like air passenger levy, shipping levy, then billionaires' wealth tax. And now there is an re-emphasis on military security. So why don't we put kind of a little levy on arms trading? Because more than $2.5 trillion are invested in military expenditures, which are taken for perceived threats. But climate change is a real threat. So we need to go beyond the box of traditional public sources for climate finance. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Misan. Thanks for this contribution. And I will pass the floor to Elise.
Thank you so much, Sandra, and congratulations. Deep gratitude for your leadership and also for the leadership of Brazil and the co-presidency in this very important moment. So I'm a founder of Climate Bridges and also a senior advisor to the Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative. So we have filed a submission, which I shared. And thank you so much for making sure gender is on the map. As we know, less than 1% of climate finance is going to women. Yet women are not just the victims of climate change, they are also the agents of change. They are the leaders, the entrepreneurs that are scaling up climate solutions on the ground.
There's a huge potential, and I really would like to partner up with all of you here to make sure this is included in the roadmap, to make sure it actually happens, to make sure there is more finance in the gender action plan, there is gender on the Baku to Belém roadmap, but also working with NIGARD, the high-level champions, on the SME Day, which will be on the 17th of November during COP. And so we are working with UNFCCC, with NIGAR, with Brazil, Australia, many countries, to make sure we have implementation already, even without the the COP decision on gender action plan. We can already move forward. The Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative is something that works, that can be scaled up, that can leverage for $1 of public sector investment. You can actually leverage 20 times more investment of private sector investment. And I think we really need both. It's about public funding and also private funding to go into the hands of women entrepreneurs on the ground to scale up these solutions. So, so I would love to work with you, Sandra, with the co-presidency, especially on that day, on the 17th of November, to make sure this is on the map and to make sure we actually make it happen. So thank you so much, and hope to see you in Belém, all of you.
Thank you so much, dear Elise, and great to hear your plans and also these initiatives. So I will pass it then to Luis and Elmadine. I just want to mention 3 questions that are in the chat, and also thank you everyone. And I'm so sorry that probably we're not gonna go through all the questions, but there are 3 that I would like to emphasize. So the first one is about the process. And if there are some critical dates that you would like to share in terms of like when the draft will be ready, like something along those lines. And also just a quick reflection about the expectation around the text. So we know that it's not a negotiating item, but what in your point of view could be something that can happen, or what would be ideal in your point of view. And finally, this point about how to, for instance, react or hear these elements about the legal responsibilities, not to what extent something related to what Andres was mentioning. So if there are different sources, if developing countries are called to contribute, how to ensure that the roadmap also calls to the legal responsibilities of developed countries. And I know this is a huge topic, but if you want to reflect. So I'm going to pass it to you. I know that you have to go, Luis and Elmadine, but if you have 2 minutes to react to these important points, so I will give you the floor. So I'm going to start with you, Elmadine, if you want to just close some closing remarks and responding to these points if you want.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Using this opportunity, once again, I would like to thank GFLAC. Once again, all of us, we witnessed how this discussion with civil society and the non-party stakeholders is important, because really valuable. All of the views and suggestions were valuable, and it's very important to hear all of them. And I think that COP29 and COP30 presidencies are committed to hear and to listen everybody. So this is our strategy and line. So it's within this line, and thank you for creating this space and providing us with this platform. And I would like once again to thank everybody who joined and who contributed to this discussion. And in my closing remarks, I would like to, in particular, answer one question. I think that which is very important for everybody present here. When this report will be published or presented, and when the civil society will see it, non-party stakeholders will see it. Here, I have to underline that both presidencies giving the same importance, the views of the parties and non-party stakeholders. From that point of view, that was our joint initiative that non-party stakeholders should be part of the discussions from the beginning, from the start of the 2025. I mean, we have introduced this approach. And here, towards the end, we are not changing our position. We are keeping the same attitude. And I would like to underline that both parties and non-party stakeholders, will have the opportunity to see the roadmap on the same day. We are not differentiating, and according to our roadmap for the roadmap, the date of the publishing the report is the 27th of October, and if nothing will change, I mean, on 27th of October, the report will be released. And as I said, non-party stakeholders together with the parties will have the chance to review it, to see it. And at the end, thank you very much. Once again, I would like to wish everybody a very successful COP ahead, in particular COP30 presidency. Have a good day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Elmadine. I will pass it quickly to Luis. Thank you so much, Luis.
Yes, no, thank you very much again. Thank you to Elmadine, to you for organizing this. As I said, it was incredibly helpful and useful for us, and it really helped us to understand better, including some of the submissions that we got from some of the participants. So thank you again for that. In terms of the expectations, I think obviously the expectations of the COP30 and I'm sure of COP29 is to have all parties saying that they love our roadmap and that they will work towards and they will respond. But this is really on the part of the parties to decide what they are going to do with the roadmap. And we have high expectations that that parties will be very happy about the content of the roadmap, but we're trying our best to fulfill this mandate in the best way possible. But it's ultimately, as you know, and you're all experts in that, it's on the parties to decide what they're going to do and how they're going to react to the roadmap. And in terms of the legal responsibilities, luckily this year we have had the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice, which provides how they interpret the climate change law. So we have the 15 judges of the International Court of Justice saying what they think needs to happen in terms of obligation of states in relation to climate change. So it will not be again for the COP30 and COP29 to interpret any legal obligations, but luckily we have already had the International Court of Justice doing that this year. Again, I'm personally very encouraged by this conversation and by the different inputs that we have, and I'm really confident and hopeful above all that we'll be able to respond to this mandate. Just very quickly to say that adaptation. Professor Mizan Khan talked about innovative sources, about innovations in general, and yes, for instance, we are very encouraged by the work that in some of the innovations that are coming from Bangladesh, for instance, the house of the Grameen Bank. That has helped us think for quite some time now how we can, the importance of including people and putting people at the center of financial discussions. And as I said before, we are not missing out on the access elements of our roadmap and of the climate finance discussion. So rest assured that we will respond to those, and very much looking forward to seeing you all in Belém, and thank you again very much for this conversation.
Thank you so much, Luis Elmadine. We know that you need to leave, but we really want to thank you for your time, for your effort, and just to really emphasize that civil society, different organizations, different groups have been in this process for so long, but really wanting to support, wanting to have the best outcome possible to support climate action in developing countries. And the key messages, of course, is really emphasize not only the quantity, but mainly the quality of finance, this distribution, between mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage. And of course, continue working in yes, we know that there are several sources that will be part, but I think in terms of the quality of the participation of private and public resources are also very, very important. And as many colleagues said, it's really, really critical that the roadmap is connected to not only with different processes within the convention, like GGA and others, but also other processes that are happening out there. So we really see the roadmap as a connector, no, as an opportunity to continue the conversation. And as you said, we know that parties are in charge of deciding what to do with it, but we truly believe that it's going to be important to continue the conversation and really have something that is not only arriving at COP30, but also has a plan forward. So thank you so much. Thank you all colleagues for participating in this dialogue, which is only a space to have this open conversation with you. And obviously you have all the submissions, and we will be very happy to support in any way for the further conversations. And of course, we know that it's not going to be an easy task, but we will be there as organizations and experts supporting this process. But we truly believe that it's important to accelerate scaling up climate finance. So thank you so much. We wish you a wonderful day, and we will share with Luis and Almarin all the questions. So don't worry, just in case they have time to be in contact with you to respond to all of them. So thank you. We wish you the best, and thanks everyone